Welcome to the Great Broker Podcast. I'm your host, David Hauk. In each episode, I talk with elite commercial real estate brokers about the deals, decisions, and lessons that define a great career in brokerage. Real brokers, real stories. Let's go. Today's guest is Curt Holcomb, Vice Chairman with JLL's Global Data Center Solutions practice. Curt is a Texas Longhorn, and he's based in Dallas, Texas. Curt is one of the data center industry's most recognized professionals. He's a frequent voice in the media. He has over 3 decades of commercial real estate experience. Plus, he has a tech career. He has advised users, developers, investors, and operators on some of the most complex and capital-intensive projects in the world. Name brand clients such as Google, CyrusOne, Amazon, Microsoft, EDS, Vanguard, USAA, Toyota. He's worked in over 60 markets across 40 states. I'm interested in what states he hasn't worked in yet. And in just the last 5 years, Curt has helped clients transact over 7,000 acres of land, secure 5 gigawatts of power capacity, and more than 50 megawatts of colo transactions. Today, as AI is driving unprecedented demand for power, land, fiber, and digital infrastructure, Curt is helping shape the future of one of the fastest growing sectors in commercial real estate. Curt, welcome to the Great Broker Podcast. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. It's great to see you. You know, I love to talk data center.
I always want to know how great brokers got into the commercial real estate business. You didn't start off as an intern at JLL. You had a different route.
I've really had a career in real estate and also a career in the technology business. That's the basis for me getting into a specialty like data centers. You mentioned I was a Longhorn. I graduated from UT in Austin in probably the worst economic time in Texas in the late 80s and early 90s. I got out with a liberal arts degree and a bad GPA, and I really had limited opportunities. What I needed to do was go where the opportunity was, and Dallas, Texas was the place to be. I was recommended to a guy named John Reed. John Reed was 31 years old, fresh out of Trammell Crow Company. He was starting a tenant rep business just as Roger Staubach was starting the Staubach Company here in Dallas. And as you know, it was brand new to the industry back then. He pitched me on what he was doing. He said, "I've got good news for you and bad news. The good news is I will teach you the commercial real estate business from the tenant rep side. The bad news is I can't pay you anything." And I thought, well, that doesn't sound so great. He said, "It'll take 6 to 12 months for you to make anything. I will teach you the business. I'll help you on pitches." And so I said, "I really like this guy. I like what he stands for." And so I joined up. In the beginning, it was just learning the basics. I was hitting the phones, cold calling, doing all the things that, you know, you have to do as a young broker. And that led to my first deal, which I'll never forget it, Atlantic Mutual Insurance Company, 12,000 feet. Ended up being a 12-year deal. I made a $60,000 commission at, I think it was month 9 that I made my first dollar, and that was it. John was more than just real estate. He was an entrepreneur, and he bought this technology from a Canadian company that allowed two-way interaction over cable systems. That kind of led me into my tech career, but as he started with this other technology deal, I wanted to go work with somebody who was just tenant rep. So I left John, and he understood why. And I went with another group. We had a bunch of young guns. The oldest, there were 2 partners. The oldest one was 32. I think I was like 26 years old. And all we did was go out and pitch business. I mean, we hit the phones. And I discovered one thing, David, that I think a lot of people don't do these days. Calling people on the phone is limited to success. As everybody knows, it's a numbers game. I started just going to office buildings and going top to bottom And I'd walk in an office and I would ask to see if I could speak with the decision maker. I got kicked out of every building in downtown Dallas. That was kind of a badge of honor for me. We were a bunch of young guns and we had no fear. And somehow we talked the Principal Financial Group into letting us work on their entire portfolio of office sites around the country. And I led that effort, and I ended up doing, 55 or 60 transactions in the 40 states entrance. I did office tenant rep deals in Honolulu to Seattle to Boston to Miami to San Diego and everywhere in between.
How old were you?
I was 26 and 27 years old at the time. Lead partner there is a guy named Mark Latham. So John Reed, who hired me, and Mark Latham really were my true mentors into my real estate career. And the two things that they had in common, they're the two best salespeople I've ever met in my life. They had completely different styles, but they taught me number one, John Reed taught me the real estate business. He was a lease tactician. And he worked on the leasing side at Trammell Crow, leasing, their buildings downtown Dallas. And he knew more about office leases than probably anybody I've ever met. Mark Latham, he basically taught me that to be successful, you have to have no fear. I still don't know how the Principal Financial Group had the faith in us, a bunch of young guys, to handle literally 70 plus portfolio of office sites, but they did. That led us into Sun Microsystems, Oracle years later. We did a lot of work for them in the western half of the US. And I think what led me into the tech industry was 26, 27, 28, and I was traveling. I mentioned Honolulu to, Seattle to Boston. I was on the road 175 days a year for about 4 years, and I got burned out. And one day I'd come back from a really rough trip, and my phone was ringing when I got home. It was John Reed. And John said, "I've been following you in the real estate. I know you're doing well, but that tech company that I'd started has taken off." And he said, "I want you to come back and work for me. You're going to help me with business development. We're going to go out and raise a bunch of money from the private markets with the goal of going public. And we're going to work on traditional business development, finding customers, which I know you can do. And then I'm going to teach you the finance side and raise capital." So we raised 50 to $60 million, which back then was a lot of money. And then we ended up going public. That's how I learned the technology business. And before we were eventually sold, John said, "Hey, this internet thing, it looks like that might be a big thing. Go out and learn about it." So that was my first entry into everything internet. So think 1996, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
about the time you probably got your first email,
Mm-hmm.
96, 97. I went out and learned about the internet. Not a technical person by nature, so everything I did, I read. When I wasn't working, I was reading. Just self-immersion in it. I was used to self-immersion because when I was doing the tenant rep stuff, that's how you're successful. You've got to work your rear end off. Same thing in the technology business. I took those same values that I'd learned, and just went all in on technology. I had some people come to me and say, "Hey, we understand you know real estate. You understand what we do. We're looking for a place for our servers. Can you help us?" And I said, "Yeah, I can do that." A couple of side projects later, I started to realize that, look, these telecom companies, you think cable and wireless, WorldCom, and some of the groups that most of which are no longer with us, Level 3, they're out looking for switch sites in telco hotels. And the light bulb went off. And I said, "Wait a minute. I understand technology. I understand the real estate business. It looks like there is kind of a new asset class that's forming, and it's what we called it at the time was technical real estate." I decided to get back in the real estate business and specialize in technical real estate. I interviewed with the Staubach Company and Trammell Crow, and I ended up going with Trammell Crow. And I helped start what became their data center practice. This is back in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then we were doing telecom switch sites and telco hotels, and then the bubble burst. and you had a lot of money that was out there chasing different things, and a lot of internet startups that really didn't have a business. That led to a couple of years when I wasn't making very much money at all. And then after the market improved, the big enterprises started doing ground up build to suits for their internal IT needs. And that was really the birth of everything right there.
So, with this technical real estate at Crow, were you representing corporations who needed switch sites?
So we were doing deals with primarily telecom companies. So, Cable and Wireless, WorldCom,
Hmm.
Level 3.
Okay.
And they would come to us and say, we need a switch site for our telecom gear so that we can route data and voice over our networks and then trade it with other telecom companies. That was their business. And where they needed to be was in a telco hotel. And, telco hotel is basically in every market you have one. In Dallas, it's the Infomart, which is
Mhm.
really a big part of my career. You have a telco hotel where all fiber that comes into a market terminates. And so you have a Cable and Wireless and a Verizon and an AT&T. All of them have switch sites in these hotel facilities. These buildings are highly connected. The nerve center in every market are these telco hotels. So in the beginning, it was all tenant rep and representing those groups and helping them negotiate these switch sites. And they needed backup power generators. They needed UPS. They had different racks of servers in the facilities, which generate a ton of heat. So you have to have specialized cooling systems. The trick was to learn all of that and be able to translate what these telco and technology companies needed and turn that into basically a real estate lease in these telco hotels.
I know the Infomart is a famous building. It's one of the biggest out there. Tell me about your experience at Infomart and what you learned.
And that's a great question, and it's really one of the highlights of my career. In the beginning, I was just representing tenants going in there, and the Infomart was developed by Trammell Crow, and it was a pet project of Mr. Crow. In Mr. Crow's vision, and man, he was a visionary in the truest sense. Mr. Crow said, I'm doing all these showrooms for the furniture industry, for the clothing industry, et cetera. I want to do one for the technology industry. So, in typical Trammell Crow fashion, he went out and designed a building that originally was over 3 million square feet and 14 stories tall and wanted to call it the Infomart. And he eventually scaled that down to half that. And what he built was a 1.6 million square foot building. He went to the technology companies at the time, thinking EDS, Xerox, AT&T, and T, and asked them, if I'm gonna build this for you guys to showcase your computer server, back then it was mainframe computers. What do I need to do or bring to this building? And they said, you need a redundant source of power. So you need a feed from at least two substations to the building. In case one of them goes out, we can switch over to the other and our computers never go down. The other thing you need to do is there's this new thing called fiber optic cables. And these cables are going to be really what the telecom industry is going to base itself on going forward. If you can talk Southwestern Bell, who was the regional Bell operating company at the time here in Dallas, if you can talk them into running their fiber optic cable into this building, that would be a great thing. So Mr. Crow, he doesn't go out and get two feeds from two substations. He goes out and gets three feeds from three substations.
Hmm.
He goes to Southwestern Bell, talks them into not only running fiber but paying for it to run into his building, and then he goes to AT&T and T, and then the precursor to Level 3. So he had three of the largest fiber carriers built into the building, and that was really the start of one of the first telco hotels in the entire United States and probably the world. He ended up filling up that building, and it really back then, this is, in 1986 and '87 when it occupancy through the '90s, and then, he ended up selling the facility to, one of his, junior partners, and that junior partner came to us at Trammell Crow and said, "Will you manage this facility for us and lease it?" And of course, we said yes. And then the telecom bubble burst. So they had some bankruptcies in the building. They'd gotten down to less than 70%. And that owner said, "We need somebody that has expertise in technology and data centers to help us market this to fill it up." And I'd never leased a building in my life. I didn't want to lease a building, but I decided to do it. And I figured I'm working in a niche. This data center industry is really a very narrow niche, but you can split between representing both sides if you had to put up the Chinese wall. So I decided to do that. Another colleague at Trammell Crow, Chris Herman, was representing Bank of America in an operations center. And the Infomart was a million plus square foot facility. It had square feet of vacant space. And I said, "This is a perfect building for that. We've got everything you need. We got backup power, which they needed." It was part data center and part operations center for the bank. We ended up doing a deal with Bank of America for about 380,000 square feet and went from being a building that was less than 70% occupied to 98% occupied. Just prior to that, the building had changed hands again for $104 million, less than 70% occupied.
Mm-hmm.
We put the Bank of America in there, and the basically went to 96%. And the new owner said, "That's great. We're going to take this out and refi it. Will you help us refi it?" They bought it. They bought it for 104, and less than 18 months later, we went and refied it, and the value of the building was $238 million. And they took out over $100 million in the refi and put it in their pocket. Eventually, the new owners was ASB Capital Management, and we started to convert some of the space that wasn't data center into data center. And within another 4 years, they went out and recast the loan again at about 500 million. So we're going from 104 million to 500 million in about 8 years. The biggest tenant we had in the building was Equinix, and they occupied 270,000 feet. They are the biggest REIT in the data center business today. And obviously, if you're a REIT, you don't want to lease space, right? So they came to us with an offer to buy it, and we sold it about less than 2 years after we had recast it at 500 million for 800 million. So it went from 100 to 800 million in about a 10-year time span.
Wow.
And Equinix owns it today. They've actually built another building on the site. I have no idea what the value of the property is. I would put it somewhere close to $2 billion today.
So now you're in the data center business. It used to be technical real estate.
Right?
When did you realize, hey, I'm in the data center business rather than the switch site business?
Those same people that we were going out and doing switches for, say Cable and Wireless. They said, "Curt, we need you to go out and find 50,000 square feet for our switch." And so I'd go out and I, did a survey of where they could do it. Before I could finish the survey, probably 2 weeks after they gave me the initial assignment, they said, "You know what? There's this thing called the co-location business, and we're going to get into that. So we're going to do a switch site on half, and then we're going to do co-location in the other half. We need you to double the requirement to 100,000 feet." I said, "Okay, that sounds like a good deal to me. What's the co-location business?" And
Mhm.
basically what the co-location business is, you build out a data center environment and then you lease, portions of it to enterprise users who want to, instead of having on-premises data centers, they'll outsource, to that co-location provider. That's when I started to think, this is not the switch site business, it's the co-location business, which is the data center business. These co-location facilities they're building are just like the data centers we're building for Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase for their enterprise use. That's really when the light bulb went off that, the industry is really transitioning from telco into the data center realm. where you're really hosting servers, which contain all the IT and all the data for all these corporations.
So now your business is working with hyperscalers, enterprises, meaning corporations that
Mhm.
have data needs, and also with data center developers and land speculators, perhaps.
Our business evolved in jail. We have our bread and butter Fortune 500 enterprise clients. We were doing a ton of tenant rep in
Hmm.
negotiating co-location agreements with the co-location developers like QTS, Digital Realty, and Equinix. And so we specialized in that from say 2008 to this day. And co-location providers or data center developers have asked us, "Hey, you filled up our buildings in Dallas and Chicago and other markets. We need a new building. Help us go out and find a new building or a new site." So in the say 2015 and 16, we're going out and trying to find buildings that had good power stories, that have a lot of power to them already, and we were either leasing those buildings, but more than likely acquiring those buildings on behalf of the colo operators. They would build out their co-location space, and then we would come back in with our user clients, our enterprise colo clients, and we and others would fill up those buildings. Before COVID, the supply of available co-location space was getting relatively thin. There's a lot of demand out there. All of the Fortune 500 has decided to outsource their data center needs, and that they're going to two groups. They're going to the co-location companies, the QTSs, the digital realties. And they're also doing cloud deployments. So
Hmm.
the big cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google, and groups like that. So we've started with COVID having a pretty thin supply. And when COVID hit, all the assignments we were working on, we got calls from everybody. We don't know what's going to happen. Let's put a pause on everything. Well, literally, I got my first call back from one of those groups about 2 weeks after everybody was sent home. And they said this: "We've got enough infrastructure for 5,000 employees to work from home. Unfortunately, we have 25,000 employees. So we need to go back the requirement we were working on, and we need to double it." But
As
that's
everybody's
what
on
happened.
Zoom, everybody's on Teams, and
Absolutely.
all the calls, and so remote
That's a
work increased the
absolutely.
need for data centers.
That's absolutely right, and really, we were one of the only groups other than maybe industrial where our business started to pick up in COVID. And, in about 2022, I got my first call from a group that, wanted to do GPU as a service, is what they called it. And that's really the precursor to the boom we're seeing with artificial intelligence. And what GPU as a service is basically groups like Lambda Labs and CoreWeave, and groups like that were basically going out and securing data center capacity to deploy NVIDIA graphical processing units or GPUs to run artificial intelligence. So I've started getting calls literally every week from different groups like the CoreWeaves and the Lambda Labs and others. And they said, "What capacity can you find for us?" So all the limited supply that was out there after the
Mhm.
enterprise users started to take up more space was taken up in about 9 months with these GPU as a service providers. And we went from, having maybe 5% vacancies to 0. And that's pretty much in all markets. And along with that, the disruption in supply change, nobody was able to build new data center capacity. So it was just what was available, all that got absorbed, but nobody was able to develop. So we had no development of data center capacity for about 18 to 24 months. So here we are with all this demand, and we're at zero supply.
Mhm.
At the same time, artificial intelligence and these GPU as a service companies are calling us left and right looking for capacity. That started the colocation developers and the hyperscalers. Think AWS, Microsoft, Google, Oracle. They're all looking for land and power capacity to develop a supply. And, in the old days, in, the early 2000s, we were doing site selection for the enterprise users. And, we hadn't done a lot of that for the enterprises because they're all outsourcing to the colo operators and hyperscalers in the late 2000s and, into the teens. And what we found ourselves doing for all those colocation developers and the hyperscalers is looking for land. And really, as I tell people, we don't really look for land. What we look for is available power capacity on the grids that are out there. And the land is just follows along with that. If we find an area within the ERCOT grid here in Texas that has available capacity, we start there. And then we find land that goes with it. And, right now we are in just a boom time of going out and acquiring land for hyperscalers, the colocation developers, and then there's a lot of speculators that have figured out if I either own land today or I can go out and acquire land for industrial rates, maybe $3 to $5 a square foot. If I can prove up a power story here, maybe secure some capacity, then 2x, 3x, 4x. And so there's a lot of speculators in the market, some of which have been successful in having land where they've acquired for $2 a foot and then selling it for $15 a foot or $20 a foot to the hyperscalers and to the data center developers and colocation outfits.
So you're kind of like a power broker these days.
Not only that, if you'd have told me 3 years ago that we would be negotiating transactions that included the development of large power plants as part of the deal, I would have told you were crazy. Not only are we looking for power capacity, we're looking at natural gas lines, looking at where large solar deployments are, and we're coupling power capacity from existing power capacity with natural gas pipelines and solar that can provide additional capacity with that land. And one case recently, we sold a 5,000 acre parcel to a group that bought the acreage that has a great existing power story to it, but they needed gigawatts of additional power. So we put together a deal for a natural gas power plant, 1.2 gigawatt power plant. And not only did they buy 5,000 acres, they ended up buying the whole power plant as well. That's the future, I think, of the market. We're going from blocking and tackling real estate transactions, coupling that with existing power capacity to ensuring power capacity going forward by being able to integrate new sources of electric capacity with the development of power plants as well.
What's it like negotiating with utilities or energy companies versus doing deals with developers like Trammell Crow?
It is very, very painful. The utility business is one of the oldest, old school, stodgy industries, and they're not used to making decisions quickly. These technology companies want to move fast. We're in a complete supply and demand imbalance. Decision making timing and the timing to decisions and all that is paramount. And the technology industry negotiating with the utility industry is cats and dogs. I mean, they're two different environments. So I would tell you it's painful. So you have to be patient, number one. Number two, you have to understand the utility business and what their decision making process is like in order to help your clients navigate through all that. That's a lot of our value these days. We have relationships with the major utilities. We understand their decision making process. To some extent, the regulatory environment that they're in. There's a whole bunch of hurdles you have to jump over and hoops to jump through, and it can mean the difference in a development project of additional 12 to 36, maybe even 48 months before you get something completed. So it's it's a completely different environment, and it's one that we're helping navigate through.
Most brokers are talking about the bricks and the sticks and the cost per square foot and what's the rental rate or what's the cap rate on this building. You're looking at what land price might be the smallest component in some cases. You're looking at utility costs, the
Hmm.
supply of water, and now you've got the politics of putting a
Yes.
data center in a variety of places or even in states. Uh,
Hmm.
how do you assess the political risk of data centers?
Well, as most people have seen, there is a large, very vocal opposition to data centers in lots of communities and in some states. And I have to say that the data center industry as a whole has done an awful job of communicating to the public what the benefits are to data centers and data center development. What we're facing right now, David, is a national anti development opposition that is organized. The data center industry hasn't really taken the proper steps in educating the public. So the politicians, whether they be state, county, or local, are feeling the heat from a lot of these opposition groups. And a lot of the information that's out there is frankly misinformation. And of course, I'm on the side of the data center industry, and you'd expect me to say that, but it really is the truth. But the reason why these developments are getting approved, and there are some bans out there. Eventually, we'll see most of these get approved, and the reason why is the economic benefits that these developments mean to these communities, counties, and states. And the reason for that is the capital investment in these facilities. In traditional real estate, you're talking about traditional metrics for what it costs to develop an office building. This is in a whole different league. These groups are spending billions of dollars in building the shell building, which is really a nominal cost to the total cost. Where all the money's being sunk is in the critical infrastructure within the facility itself.
Mhm.
So and then beyond that, there's the capital investment once the data center is full in servers and software. And just to give you an idea, per megawatt for just the critical infrastructure within the facility, you're going to spend about $15 million per megawatt. A typical data center that building that's being built might be one story, might be two, and we're seeing some even three and four level. It's a 350 megawatt building. So you take 350 megawatts, you times it by 15 million, and that is a lot of money. Um, it's not hundreds of millions; it's billions of dollars. All of that capex in infrastructure is taxed. For instance, I'll use Texas as an example. You have sales tax. That sales tax flows to the state, it flows to the county, and it flows to the municipality. In addition, here we have a business personal property tax. So all that capital expenditure on critical infrastructure is taxed for business personal property as well. And then you have the traditional property taxes on top of that. But there's a municipality in the Dallas area, suburb of Dallas, Wilmer, Texas. Total tax revenues for a typical year is somewhere around 40 million. Just one 500 megawatt development doubles the tax revenue generated not by the state, county, and that municipality combined, just to that municipality. We're going to double their tax base. Think about that. That's a lot of roads. That's a lot of hospitals. That's a ton of schools.
Mhm.
And they're going to fund lots of communities, municipalities, counties, and certainly are a huge boon to the state as well.
Kurt, if there's a young person who's coming out of college right now or business school and they're interested in commercial real estate, and maybe they could go to New York City and lease office space or retail space, or they could go out to Los Angeles and sell multifamily buildings. But boy, data centers are hot right now. I want to get into the data center business. How do they go about doing that?
On my team, I've got two of my younger teammates were interns. for me during the summer. And you can tell pretty quickly on somebody who would be good in this space. The blocking and tackling of brokerage is the most important thing. And you have to be able to sell. I mean, people think that you have to have this knowledge of technology to get into this game. That is not the case. We're running a real estate brokerage operation, just like our office tenant rep group or our industrial group. We do the same things they do, but the terminology we use is different. I would tell somebody, number one, get in the commercial real estate game. If you're driven and you have discipline and you can sell and you have a thirst to learn new things, it's the business to get into. Now, getting into the data center business, we're still a really small niche industry. I've been doing this for 26 years. And when I first started, it was a narrow niche, and it still is a narrow niche. 26 years ago, I was either dumb enough or smart enough to focus on this niche. It's obviously paid dividends for me, but it is a niche play. And I would tell people to get involved either on the commercial real estate side or maybe go to the co-location development side and maybe find a job with one of the developers like QTS or DataBank. And you can learn the data center business from that side. And then eventually, if you wanted to transition into commercial real estate, you definitely have a leg up on somebody who's just coming out of college or somebody that's been in the brokerage business doing office tenant rep. So I would say one of two ways: just get in it in the brokerage side, or maybe start with a co-location developer on that side and learn that side of the business.
So you're saying you gotta still be a salesperson, still be a broker. You don't need to be a computer scientist from MIT or Stanford.
Absolutely not. I tell people I know enough technology to be dangerous. And that's really the truth. I am far from an engineer. I do understand technology at a base level, not from an engineering level. And I find myself in situations with heads of real estate that are having to work with their IT group and figure out a co-location facility, or maybe it's an on-prem data center. Believe me, the head of real estate has no idea what the IT guy is talking about. And the IT group doesn't understand the real estate side of the business. And I find myself in the middle of them, and I have the confidence of the IT side 'cause they figure out that I do understand their business at some level. And I basically are in between the two, and I tell the IT guy what the real estate guy's saying and vice versa. And the true goal in brokerage, and this goes to office tenant rep, you have to manage the expectations of your client. It's that same real estate brokerage blocking and tackling. I may speak a little bit of a different language at times, but that's it.
You're benefiting from the AI explosion. Curt, how are you using AI in your practice to be faster, smarter, et cetera?
Are doing some work with a couple of the groups that have the large language models out there. And I'll speak to one, Anthropic and Claude. Claude right now that's the top model that's out there, and we are using it. It is absolutely amazing what it can do. We're using it from a financial analysis standpoint. We still have to do the same financial analysis that you do in traditional brokerage work, but we're able to take that data and do things graphically and present that to our clients in a completely different way. From the marketing side, we're able to generate things and ask Claude to make different comparisons. And it's taken our marketing game to a completely different level. I won't say I'm a power user. I'm not. I've got guys and girls on my team that are much better at it. It's an invaluable tool. This is going to change the way we conduct business. It's going to open up new industries. Think about in the healthcare world and some of the things it's doing in proving up drug efficacy and things like that. The internet, which really started my industry, was on par with the industrial revolution. There's a lot of negative press on it's taken jobs or it may. I think there's a great argument that it's going to create entire new industries. When the internet came along, you think about the banking world. We used to have huge facilities where they process checks. Well, the people that were doing that are now doing something else within the banking world,
Mhm,
right? And it's going to be a reallocation of human capital.
mhm.
People may have to learn how to do new things. And I think AI is going to create a ton of opportunities and create tens, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of new jobs over time. So I think as workers, we're going to have to redeploy our human capital.
What do you think about data centers in space, and how are you going to make commissions on that?
Well, so I've thought about that, Dave, and I have gotten that question a ton. I've gotten it from clients, and they know that that's not something that they're going to need to evaluate or think about for another, 12 months, 18 months, or probably longer. I'm fascinated by it. And what I've learned in the technology business is you never bet against Elon Musk. He's going to deploy some sort of data center capability in space, whether or not it'll be something that we could do at scale and when that'll happen, you'll never know. But it won't shock me that at some point we do have significant deployments in space. And believe me, don't you worry, we're going to figure out a way to make a brokerage fee on it. What's the difference in doing co-location or cloud deals than doing a data center deal in space? Really
Well,
nothing.
you're going to be finding land for rocket launching sites.
We haven't been asked to do that yet, but I can tell you that if they asked us to do it and it had a power component, we'd do it.
You're busy as all get out right now. I can't even imagine how many deals you might be working on at any given time. What are you doing when you're outside the office?
Well, so I got married a year and a half ago, and we've been busy. We bought a new house and redid it. But I think what you're getting at, what does Curt Holcomb do? What is he passionate about? And one thing I can tell you I've been doing since I was 6 years old is snow skiing. I try to go at least 20 days a year. And I know you're a big skier as well, and we have that in common. I love to helicopter ski. I love to ski in Utah, in your neck of the woods, Colorado. I've been going there, New Mexico. I also love to learn, and I've been a voracious reader since I was a kid, and that partly brought me into the technology. And nowadays, I don't read as much. Guess what I do, Dave? I listen to podcasts. So here we
Good.
are, right? I also love to travel, love the beach. I love to go to new places, learn new things.
Are there any organizations or charities that you're particularly fond of?
I'm fortunate enough to have some very good friends who are involved with some charities that they started, and a lot of them are for kids that they've had that might have had disabilities. I like to focus on charities that are more local in nature, that have been started by individuals that I know personally. Because if I'm to donate, make a contribution, whether it be my time or money, I like to be able to see the effects. One of them is the Rice School of Dallas. It's a school for all kids, but primarily for kids with Down syndrome and other disabilities. And then the next evolution of that was Daymark Living, which is the same type of atmosphere, but it's for older children. Anything that has to do with children. I don't have any children of my own. So to me, that's a place where I can make a difference.
Are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm always ready, David.
Uh, Coffee or cocktail?
I would say both, but if push comes to shove, cocktail.
Are you an early riser or a night owl?
I'm both. I'm not a really good sleeper, and I operate on probably 4 hours of sleep a night. I'll catch up maybe 1 day every 2 weeks.
Biggest mistake young brokers make?
I think the biggest mistake I've seen them make is not trusting in the process and making mistakes where they lose the trust of their client. Good things don't happen all the time. You're gonna make mistakes, and you need to be upfront, and you need to tell your clients, "Look, here's what happened, and if your fault, you need to own up to it, and then you need to tell them, 'This is how we're gonna fix it.'" If you do that, your client will look at you and go, "Okay, they're telling us what happened, being upfront about it, and they're offering a solution. We like these guys."
Your favorite place to do business besides the great state of Texas or the city of Dallas?
I'd probably have to say Northern Virginia, because I've done a lot of work there. Jeff Grow is a good friend of mine and teammate within our data center group. I love the area. It's beautiful, but I really like it because it's the number one data center market, and we're about to pass them here in Texas.
Okay, a little competition there. One word, just one word to describe today's data center market.
Hot.
What is the most used app on your phone?
Weather Underground. I'm a frustrated meteorologist. I love the weather. I love to check it in Colorado for snow reports. I love figuring out what's going to be like in Dallas.
When folks say, wow, Curt Holcomb, he is a great broker. He is the man in data centers. What does that mean to you?
I hope those people trust that if they're working with me, they're going to get the best service, that they can trust me. And a lot of them really lean on us because we're in such a new industry to help them make decisions. And when I'm asked my opinion, I will give it to them. I think that's been a big part of being successful in this industry is that they know they're going to get the straight story from me and they trust that I have their best interest at heart.
Curt, you've been a fantastic guest. I really appreciate you appearing on the latest episode of the Great Broker Podcast. And I look forward to skiing with you this winter.
We're going to ski, David, and we're hoping that Park City and Utah gets some snow this year.
On out to Deer Valley. I'll show you around.
We're going to do it.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Great Broker Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, follow the show and share it with someone who wants to become a great broker. See you next time.